The United States of America didn't teach me freedom. It taught me compliance and then called it freedom. I know that's offensive to a lot of people. And to be honest, I would have said that was offensive once. I mean, I remember when I first met my British partner, him saying things like that early on in our relationship and us having very, very severe fights about it because I got so angry and defensive. But once I let my guard down a little bit and I started to see things through his eyes, I just started to realize that the story I'd been told my entire life wasn't adding up. And then when we moved to England a few years ago, all the cracks in the American freedom lies really began to show, and I just couldn't ignore them anymore. So we're told in the United States that America is the only country with free speech. But when you skim the surface just a little bit, you start to realize there are 50 countries actually that have constitutional free speech protections. They criticize their governments just like Americans do. They protest just like Americans do. They're loud about it like Americans are. And they have less government consequence than a lot of Americans have, at least in today's age. The other thing that a lot of Americans don't fully grasp is that the First Amendment of the United States Constitution actually does have a lot of limitations to it about incitement, defamation, threats, obscenity. Your employer can actually fire you in the United States for what you say. Social media platforms can remove you and ban you for what you say. As Americans, we're told that we had something that no one else had, but in actuality, we really didn't. We were told that the Second Amendment was part of freedom. And maybe it is, but the freedom to own a weapon and the freedom to live without fear of violence are not exactly the same thing. And it is something that we often equate as something that is balanced, as something that is equal in the US. And for a lot of Americans, depending on where you live, what you look like, how much money you have, one of those freedoms is completely theoretical and the other one is just non existent. In the US, we're also told that we have the fairest legal system in the world. What what you're not told, though, is that public defenders are catastrophically overloaded. 90% of criminal cases are often more resolved in plea deals, not necessarily trials. Jury of your peers is a great concept, but quite complicated when it comes to selection, geography, who actually has the money to fight any of these charges. Civil asset forfeiture means law enforcement can seize your property before you've been convicted of anything. And post 9/11 surveillance eroded the Fourth Amendment protections in ways that people never even noticed because it happened very subtly, very quietly, and legally, and with bipartisan support from the government. The architecture of the system is very real, and it's something that I don't necessarily not admire, but the gap between the architecture and what the actual lived experience is also just as real. And often, I'd say more often than not, completely ignored. We're told in the United States that freedom is about the land being full of opportunity. That if we work hard enough, we have the freedom to be anything that we want, to have anything that we want, to achieve anything that we want. But what they don't tell you is a lot of that opportunity is based on zip codes. Where you're born often predicts your economic outcome more reliably than any effort you put into it. The country with the most billionaires on earth also has one of the lowest rates of social mobility in the developed world. We're told pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, hustle, you'll get there, work your way up. But the bootstraps myth requires you not to look too closely at who made the boots and who's actually doing the pulling. And there's a lot of people that put in tons and tons of effort and don't really get anywhere. Not because of lack of characteristic in any way, but because because the lane of opportunity is so narrow that they cannot squeeze through it. In my eyes, a system that works for only some of the people and not the majority of the people is not the same as freedom. In the United States of America, we're told that we can reinvent ourselves, that it's the place to go to start over, start a new life, get a better life. The United States is where the past didn't have to define you. But it's not acknowledged that student debt follows you, that medical debt follows you, that criminal records follow you. They're part of your housing applications, job applications, loan applications. A fresh start is available, but it costs more, much more, depending on where you started from. And the thing that nobody really says out loud that you don't probably fully understand even until you lived somewhere else is that there's lots of other places out there where you can reinvent yourself. England's one of them. I'm living it. The dream was never actually exclusively American. It was just really well advertised and with a lot of volume behind it. I remember being told everywhere outside the United States of America was less free, that leaving the USA somehow meant that you were giving up a lot of freedoms, a lot of rights. But when I moved to England 3 years ago, I remember waiting to feel the loss. I remember wondering when that was going to happen, wondering what I was going to have to give up in order to live in a different society. But the loss never came. People here in the UK do the same things that we did in the United States. You get up, you get your kids to school, you go to work, you eat what you want to eat, you come home and do homework and watch television and go out on the weekends. Everything that we did in the United States. The difference is that freedom here in the UK isn't performed because it doesn't need to be. It dawned on me that the freedom rhetoric that is turned up really loud in the United States is probably more of a signal that the reality underneath needs a little bit of coverage, because quiet confidence does not have to announce itself. And we're told that we just cannot really do any better than what the United States has to offer. It's the greatest country on earth, right? When I moved to the UK, I didn't lose my freedom. In fact, I feel like I actually gained a lot more freedom. This is a hard thing to reconcile as an American because you want to believe that the home, that the place you grew up in, the place that groomed you has everything that it tells you it does and is willing to and wants to give you the life that is promising you. It's quite remorseful and emotional, actually, to admit to yourself that that might not necessarily be the case. That your country that's told you that it cares for you and it wants you to succeed and find your path and pursue your happiness doesn't actually care about you. Not in the same way that it purports to anyway. When I moved abroad, I found out I never really fully had freedom. What I had for myself mostly was performance. And a very, very good one, a very convincing one that I became exceptional at repeating myself. I was so good at it, actually, that I really, really mistook it for the real thing. But here's what I actually know now from living somewhere else. That real freedom starts when you actually stop trying to perform it. When you stop reciting what you were handed and start asking whether it really holds up. Because truth be told, what worked 250 years ago for a very specific group of people in a very specific moment in time is not automatically the answer for today. It's not a criticism. It's just how knowledge works. It's how growth works. We're supposed to learn as we get older. We're supposed to be able to figure out how to adapt, expand our mindsets. And any system that can't do that isn't free. Freedom isn't just one thing as well, I've learned. It's not just about a flag or a document or a specific line in a pledge that I learned before I could read. It's a question that you have to constantly ask yourself that never actually gets answered fully because you're constantly evolving and society around you, hopefully, is also constantly evolving. You have to ask yourself what a free life actually looks like. For me, for you exclusively, where you are, what, with what I know now, with what I've learned and experienced in my life now. But honestly, that's not even the most uncomfortable part. The most uncomfortable part for me is accepting that the answer isn't a one size fits all. And it's not something that was taught to us in school or part of some slogan or in some patriotic song. It's much more personal and complicated than that. And it's going to be ever changing. And accepting that is not a weakness. Striving for a more perfect union is what we're supposed to be doing. It's what freedom is supposed to be. That's the whole friggin' point. The countries that scare you, the ones that we're told as United States citizens and residents have lots of less freedom, some of them are just further along in asking that question out loud than the US is. It doesn't make those countries perfect by any means, just a lot more honest and a lot more free and have a better concept of what freedom, a free life at least, should be. And that's where I want to live, in a place that actually acknowledges those concepts and wants to create a more free society for all, or at least the majority of its people, as many people as it possibly can. And I don't want to live here in England just because Britain is perfect in any way, because no nation is perfect. Every nation has improvements that can be made. But because the people here in the UK are allowed to say things like, we got it wrong, without feeling like it's a betrayal to their country. It's a strength that I guess, I don't know, I just realized that the United States just doesn't seem to have, at least as of lately. And once you felt what it's like when the question is actually allowed to be asked and openly discussed, it's really hard to pretend. It's really hard to go back to pretending that the answer was settled in 1776.